everyone. This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with the help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include marketing, management, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, and more. I'm Sarah Duval, one of the co-hosts of the podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy at www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. Today, I am really looking forward to having a conversation with Chris Bonsall, Vice President of Revenue Generation for Navigate Patient Solutions. And Chris, today we're going to be talking about the importance of pre-educating patients and the positives that it drives for everyone in the practice. So I was in a practice for 18 years, and I think 6 of those years were spent as a cataract surgery coordinator, counselor, educator, scheduler, whatever you want to call it. So it's something that I was very passionate about as well. And I know that you all at Navigate are very passionate about it. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. I think it's going to add a lot of value to the listeners, which is, of course, what we always strive for here at the Ophthalmology Business Academy. So Chris, why don't you jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your company, and what was your path into ophthalmology?
Yeah, I'll say, first of all, thanks for having me. A little bit about myself. I think a lot of my background is unfortunately pretty boring. I've spent about a decade in ophthalmology. I started, they say it's who you know. Ran into someone who started an EMR platform for eye care many years ago. And most of my time has been spent representing software solutions, electronic medical records, practice management systems. And although I felt like there was a need for those things in the industry, never really felt like I was making a meaningful impact on practices or specifically directly to patients. But in my time there, what I learned kind of going in and out of hundreds of practices across the country is practices were turning to automation everywhere they could. And it was helping to improve a lot of things, repetitive tasks like sending appointment reminders and paying bills online. But the best practices were finding people like you, right? Focusing on the patient experience, the human touch at every step of the process. So my path to Navigate was I was approached by the founders of this young company in early 2022. They were interested in changing the way patients are educated for cataract surgery, and I jumped at the idea. So for the past year and a half, I've been the Vice President of Revenue Generation at Navigate. I get to work with practices every single day to evaluate their cataract education process, and for many of them, make a pretty sizable impact on their business and the lives of their patients.
Nice. So you've only been around, Navigate has only been around for about a year?
Navigate is about 2.5 years old. So still, relatively young company in the organization, but we've seen a fair amount of growth over the last year and a half.
Wow, that's great. So I only recently learned about this company when we were actually in San Francisco for the Academy. Was it last month? Earlier this month, I guess. But I thought it was really intriguing. I don't know a ton about it, so we will have you kind of educate us a little bit about what it is that you do and why. You already have some players in the space, I think, that do what Navigate does. So why Navigate? I know. What was the reason for starting it? How do you set yourself apart? Take us through that process.
Yeah, it's when people think of patient education, obviously a couple names come to mind of platforms and solutions in the industry that have been around, are well established, and do a really good job. So why Navigate, right? The founders came together and really took a look at the industry and saw this challenge in ophthalmology, and we break it down into really 4 converging forces. The first one being demand is increasing, right? The boomer generation, for instance, coming through the pipeline like never before. And there's a greater need, more patients coming in for cataract surgery than we've ever seen. And that's not going to stop anytime soon. Number 2 is we see the number of new surgeons can't keep up with this rate of patient growth and can't keep up with the number of surgeons retiring. So it's a tough equation when you look at less surgeons with more patients to handle. The third factor that we look at is the pressures of profitability. It's more challenging than ever for practices to keep pace with rising costs and reimbursements going down. And then the fourth item, kind of that converging factor that we look at as a positive, is technology continues to improve. We founded Navigate because we know that lens technology is delivering on the promises that patients expect in cataract surgery and really demand these days, right? And what they can have for a surgical outcome. And so when determining how we help the industry solve for that, there's two ways that that it can be solved for. Is either surgeons can see twice as many patients 5 years from now and probably still make half as much, or find a way to bring more revenue into their practice without increasing the work. And the best way to do that is with a focus on adoption to premium. We saw education as the key way to help drive patient adoption to premium lens technology and premium surgical offerings. And depending on whose numbers you look at, the nationwide average for adoption to premium is somewhere between 15 and 18%. And we just feel like that number could and should be higher. So Navigate was founded with the idea that no patient should ever go through cataract surgery without knowing all the options available to them. And we know, like we said, there's great platforms available. Certainly don't want to come across with any of my comments as though these platforms don't work, because we feel like they absolutely do, and they drive an understanding for patients. But there is an inherent challenge with any form of one-way communication when you're educating a patient through a video or email content, if it's your primary method of pre-educating, right? The patients maybe don't have a way to ask questions in real time. The practice doesn't always know if that the patient took the time to watch the whole video or understand the content, and really gather that and remember it when they walk in the door of the practice. So we founded Navigate with the idea of a human approach to patient education. We built a team of COAs, COTs, right, taking experts out of the clinic, such as yourself, right? You've spent years educating patients, having those conversations. Those are the type of people we look for to bring to our team to educate patients through dialogue. The role of a patient navigator is connect with every patient prior to their scheduled evaluation, and then educate them through one-on-one dialogue, conversation, asking questions. We focus on understanding the patient's lifestyle. We talk about desired outcomes for surgery. How do they use their vision? We make sure they understand there's options available. We make sure they understand potential out-of-pocket expenses, expectations around the surgical process, the evaluation process, so that they can walk into the practice fully informed and more prepared to make a decision than if they simply had a document sent to them for their review.
That is so important. I mean, a good surgical educator is worth their weight in gold. And
100%.
whether they're somebody in the practice or somebody like what Navigate brings to the table. So these people are working remotely, right?
That's right. Yeah, they work across the US.
So walk me through a little bit about this. So a practice would, let's say, sign up with Navigate, right? So I assume that every practice sort of tailors their conversations, so to speak, with their assigned navigators, or how does this? Let's pretend that I'm Dr. Duval and my practice is signing up with Navigate. Let's pretend I'm the only surgeon, right? But so how does this work? Do I get assigned one navigator and then that person is calling all my pre-evals, or?
So part of what we can provide to a practice is economy of scale. We're always going to assign multiple people, right? The value there is if someone takes a vacation or gets sick or whatever it is, we're always going to make sure that machine is going. But it is very much, like you mentioned, a personalized process. And I would challenge every group that no matter how you plan to pre-educate the patients, it needs to be personalized. So as Dr. Duval, we would sit down with you and we would understand, what do you want your patients to hear? What options do you offer? We don't educate any two practices the same, because we might have a surgeon at one practice that only offers femto laser assisted cataract surgery, and maybe their partner doesn't ever touch the laser. So we want to ensure that the patient hears the options that surgeon would make available to them. Now we have our approach that we feel we've curated through educating tens of thousands of patients over the last few years, and obviously the experience that our team members bring. But we're going to put a personalized touch on that for each of the surgeons that we support, and then our proprietary platform that we've built for our team to use allows them to be really efficient, stay within those guardrails, educate to the price points that practice offers, the financing options if they do, and make that really feel like an extension of the office.
Okay. So it is very much tailored then to each surgeon, not just to a practice, but to each surgeon. I mean, I know that the practice that I came from, for example, there was one particular surgeon who had nothing to do with multifocal lenses. He
Yep.
did not care for them. He didn't believe in the technology, even still, I think. All the other surgeons did multifocals, but he did not. So, as his surgical coordinator, I probably wouldn't talk to his patients about a multifocal because he doesn't. That's not true, actually. That's not true because I feel the patient still should have all choices, right?
Yeah.
And there were actually times, now that I think about it, when a patient was his patient, but really felt strongly that they wanted a multifocal. So in that case, that patient would have the option to actually see a different surgeon. Because again,
Yeah,
they need to know all their choices. And you're doing the patient a disservice, right?
yeah.
If you're not giving them all the choices.
Our goal is true informed consent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't feel like you can give informed consent without knowing those options. And so we know we're a part of that puzzle. The patient could go to that practice's website, see all the options available. What we've found with some groups is they do want that level of triaging, right? If the patient feels strongly that they want multiple points of focus and the surgeon that they're currently scheduled with doesn't offer it for one reason or another, we now have educated that patient a week to 2 weeks prior to their evaluation. It gives the practice a little more time to maybe get them in to see a different surgeon if that's the goal of the practice. Because of course the goal is get them the best outcome for their personal lifestyle and their the anatomy of their eye that they're a candidate for, right? And so it certainly could be the case that it allows us to help triage to the right surgeon for their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I might kind of know the answer to what I'm about to ask you, but why aren't practices just doing this themselves? Why are they looking to sort of outsource this and bring in a third party? I think I know part of the reason, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing it has to do with shortage of staffing in the practice.
Yeah.
Is that part of it?
I would say that's where we're going to end up for sure. Because I can talk about this all day. They absolutely could, for starters, right? If practices that we connect with, we do run into practices that do this. They've built out a team. The challenge is finding the right staff, right? It's more and more rare for us to connect with a practice that hasn't been dealing with some sort of staffing shortage, whether that's technicians, support staff, administrative staff, particularly in the last few years since COVID. And so for those practices, it's sometimes enough of a challenge just to maintain a steady clinic flow without falling behind the patients that are in the door. The idea of calling patients ahead of time gets pretty quickly deprioritized, right? It falls to the side of the desk for whoever's assigned that job. So we've seen larger organizations take this on, sometimes in using their call center teams, if they have a dedicated call center, and adding this on to when confirming the appointment, go through some education process. We haven't yet seen it be extremely successful, only because we feel those two roles are pretty different, right? Your experience as a surgical coordinator, you need to be able to look at the patient's history and determine some parts of their anatomy and maybe they're not going to be a candidate for certain things. And so we feel like there's kind of two different roles there. So my recommendation to any of your listeners, if they want to build this model themselves, absolutely, it's something you could do. It would be focus on putting experienced technicians in the role, right? Get the most value out of the time you're spending with the patient and ensure it's someone clinical that can ask the right questions, get the patient talking, reduce their fear and anxiety through kind of their expertise on the clinical aspect of it. But yeah, they could do it. What we see is, again, I mentioned earlier, we've built our own proprietary platform to make this more efficient for our team. And so it allows us to provide economy of scale. It allows us to do this typically less expensive than a practice would if they were hiring their own team members. And it allows our team to have the ability to work from home and support multiple practices in different areas while educating personally, as we mentioned earlier, to the needs of that individual surgeon.
So what kind of results are you seeing by doing all of this pre-educating? What sort of results are the practices seeing?
One of the first things that we saw was a time savings. We anticipated to be saving some time when the patients come in educated. What we didn't expect was most of our clients are reporting 4 to 6 minutes on average per evaluation, because they're not having to go into the same conversation every single time, right? The patient walks in knowing, yes, you're going to remove my natural lens. Yes, you're going to replace it with an artificial lens. They know their options. And so for our groups that are seeing 15 evaluations on a busy day, it's about an hour back in the day for the surgeon. Some groups take that time back and reduce the burden on their team. Others are adding 2 to 3 additional eval slots into their scheduling templates to be able to see more surgical volume. So time savings has been really key. We've gotten a lot of results on reduced staff burden and easing the hiring process for groups. A lot of practices struggling to staff the experienced technicians. And so when we have groups that are looking to keep really experienced technicians in the eval appointment to make sure that they can talk through the lens technology and what the patient needs to expect, we've reduced the need in many cases for the level 3 technicians, if I can use the words of some of our practices, right? After patients come in educated from Navigate, our clients have found that they can staff with level 1 and level 2 technicians, right? They're really good team members, but maybe they're not as well versed in taking the patient through some of that education process. The patient comes in with that base level knowledge that we share. Patient experience, I'd say, is probably third. Patients are coming in having spoken with our team, and they remember the name of the navigator they spoke with, which is kind of cool. We didn't expect to build a relationship with patients as quickly as we have. And we still have patients that call back before and after surgery, thanking our team. Hey, you really made it easy for us to do. I was scared before, now I'm not. And although we are treated as an extension of the office, they have the direct line. They can call back to the navigator, and it's really rewarding to get those calls. The most valuable result we've seen, at least in the eyes of our clients, I believe, is increased conversions, right? It's the problem we're trying to solve for, to make sure that the industry takes advantage of getting more patients with those positive outcomes. And of course, our team is never selling lenses or conversions. Our team, they look at themselves as the velvet hammer. They can soften the blow of some of the information and provide a concise and consistent kind of comprehensive education. Without selling lenses, we're seeing a 13% average increase across our client base in premium adoption. And that's lift over where the practices were before they got started with our services. And so although we expected a lift, I don't know that we expected that significant of a lift across our entire client base. And it's been great to be able to drive that type of value back to the clients.
Wow, that is great. So our listeners, this is only an audio podcast. You can't see me, but as Chris was just talking, I had this huge smile on my face because one of the things that you hit upon that I guess I was going to ask about, I didn't think that you would bring it up, was building the relationships. Because as a scheduler, doing the paperwork and all that, that's not fun. Nobody likes that part of the job. But the best part of the job was building the relationships and the rapport with the patients. And they really do get to trust you and to really like you. And it's so funny. I mean, I received countless gifts from people, and I'm not even the one who was doing their surgery, but they would come back for their post-ops and they were just so happy, and they would give me a box of chocolates. Or this is interesting. So where I live in New Hampshire, we have the gun manufacturer Ruger, and we had a patient who was like an executive team member at Ruger, and he actually asked me if he could give me a gun to show his appreciation for his outcome with cataract surgery. I was like, no, I'm all set, thank you. But so it's really interesting to hear that even though these people are not in the practice, they're still able to build relationships. That is so important, Chris.
Yeah. I don't know that we've ever gotten propositioned with a gun as a gift. The happy voicemails and emails from clients.
I think that's probably a one-off, that example.
But it reinforces for us really two things: is the human approach is absolutely needed, particularly with this demographic of patients. We educate ahead of time because we want to ensure that we can spend time with the patient and without disrupting clinic flow, right? Most of the time we're reaching patients in the comfort of their own home. We're talking to them while they're on their couch, and we can spend 30 to 40 minutes sometimes when the patient needs it to answer their questions and reduce their fear and anxiety, which unfortunately is not as easy to do with a form of automated one-way communication. And so when we give that extra time with the patient, get them comfortable with the out-of-pocket costs, get them comfortable so they don't feel blindsided with any of the options or processes around surgery, it certainly allowed us to kind of build that rapport, build that relationship. I think our navigators would tell you that in working in clinic, they get those appreciations and those patients that are really happy. Unfortunately, they also sometimes have to deal with patients that aren't too happy, right? They've been waiting for a long time and they just want to get out of there. For our navigators, all day, every day, they get to call patients that are happy and excited to talk to them, and they don't have to deal with the uncomfortable patients. So it's been really great to be able to focus on the pre-education piece with that human element.
It's also really interesting because, of course, every practice and their approach is different, but speaking from experience with my practice, the patients really didn't get the pre-education. So they were coming in, whether it was for their cataract eval or just their yearly exam, and then they're told, well, your cataracts are ripe now, and so we're going to have you see the scheduler and go about that. They're often, they're overwhelmed because they're hit with so much information that they're very overwhelmed. And I don't know that they're always really in the right state of mind to be understanding all these options, and that, this toric or this multifocal is an option. And I want you to know you have the option, but you don't have to get it. Sometimes patients would think that they have to get the toric lens, and then they're upset because, well, I can't afford that. Well, and they're not necessarily understanding that they can still have the surgery and not get the toric lens. They can have the surgery, the garden variety that the insurance will pay for. But even something like that, I can understand and see the value in this pre-education when they're at home, because it's just so much. It's so much. And like you said, you're able to spend more time with them. The doctors, I'm sure that they don't like it this way, but I'm sure that sometimes when they're doing these cataract evals, it's very rote, right? It's the same thing over and over again. Just having this pre-education in the comfort of their home I see tremendous value in this. And of course, we're talking to you with Patient Navigate, but the thing is even if a practice is hearing this episode and they're not sure they wanted to outsource, whether it was with you or someone else in the space, even if they took some of these tips and tried it, maybe they could try it with their own staff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, you touch on, if you have the right team member and you're educating the patient ahead of time, it's time invested in the patient, right? The way we look at it is there could be a patient that takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes to educate, right? With a little bit of time on the front end, learning about the patient and doing some review of their chart. And they may never be a candidate for a premium lens technology. Right. But you created a great experience. They're getting the premium experience, even if they're getting the standard monofocal Medicare approved lens. Mm-hmm. And we look at that as a win, because that patient is going to attribute that value back to the office. PricewaterhouseCoopers is a leading consulting firm, and they had a consumer survey, I believe it was about 2 years ago. And it was somewhere along the lines of consumers are willing to invest 14% more in a good or service when they feel like they had a great experience. And it might not necessarily mean invested time in educating the patient to grow your bottom line, but if they're feeling like the value they're getting, even if they choose the Medicare lens, is more because they got a great experience, that lends itself to better reviews. It lends itself to stickier patients, more satisfied patients, less concern, or less risk of a patient coming back and posting something negative or fighting. So yeah, we feel like the education piece is important, whether they're converting or not.
Right. So at the end of the day, you all at Patient Navigate truly are, obviously there's some benefits that come about, right? You can increase premium lenses and increase your bottom line, but really you are focused on the patient, navigating the patient experience, right? Helping these patients understand what they're getting into from start to finish and just helping them navigate the process, because especially the older folks, it's a lot of information thrown at them. It's overwhelming. They may live alone. They may not have someone that can come to the exam with them and be that second set of ears and understand it. This approach, I just, like I said, having worked in this role, I can see that this is adding tremendous value to ophthalmology.
Well, if I could share a quick story before we
Please.
wrap up, it's
Please.
In January of this past year, we had a client that we were supporting, and they had a patient schedule their cataract eval about 2 weeks out, which was normal for that group. We called a week and a half prior to the appointment. Well, this patient never got their cataract diagnosed from an optometrist or from another surgeon at the office. They took an online quiz and it told them that they had cataracts. So as our COT is going through understanding their lifestyle, asking about their symptoms, their goals, all the things that we want to do to build kind of a backdrop for the surgeon, the red flags were going off in our COT's head that this isn't sounding like a cataract. And the more she pushed and started to understand, we reached out to our client and got the patient scheduled the very next day instead of waiting another week and a half. And it turned out to be a detached retina. So slightly different than cataract timelines. He was in surgery within 48 hours of our phone call, and the surgeon told us that in very certain terms, the patient would have been blind with as quickly as their symptoms were progressing had they not been on the phone with one of our team members. So this is something that practices, again, whether they use Navigate or reach out to patients to spend a little time on their own prior to the appointment, that patient now is a fan of that practice for life, because had they not invested in educating or otherwise calling the patient prior, they would have assumed they had a cataract, and by the time they walked in the door, they would have had irreversible damage. So it just reminds us again, the human approach can't be replaced by an online test or quiz or questionnaire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love talking about patient education. That's one of the things that I do miss about not working in a practice anymore is, the making the rapport and making the relationships with the patients. I don't know, technology is great to a point, but you cannot replace the human approach. You just can't. Human interaction will always still be vital in medicine, I think. So any further thoughts or anything that you'd want to share, Chris? And if you want to just tell us again how people could reach you if they're interested in learning more about Patient Navigate.
I'll just say I appreciate the time and the conversation. And for sure, if any practice is looking to increase profitability, focus on pre-education. It's one of the easiest places to start. It's not just the profitability, it's the patient experience. It's all the benefits that we discussed today. So if you can't find staffing yourself to do it, please reach out. You can hit us on our website, navigatepatient.com. You can email me. My name is Chris Bonsall, so C Bonsall, Bonsall at navigatepatient.com. And my cell phone's always on, 704-343-1298. And even if it's just to have a conversation and ask questions about how we do what we do, so you can look at implementing it yourself, always happy to connect.
And you can always also find Chris on LinkedIn and give him a follow there. I'm sure he'll be sharing some good information from Navigate that you could also look into too. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, kindly share it with your friends and on social media. Also, please don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead.